There's a truck sitting in a gravel lot a few miles from where I'm standing, and by any sensible measure, it has no business still being on the road. Faded paint. A dent in the bed is worn for 20 years. 280,000 miles on a clock that probably stopped being accurate a decade ago. It starts on the first turn of the key every single morning, hauls whatever you put in the back, but it asks for almost nothing in return. Somebody could buy that truck today for the price of a decent set of tires on a new one. And here's the part that should make you stop and think. While that old thing is out earning its keep, there's a brand new pickup parked at a dealership service bay across town, $66,000 of it waiting 3 weeks for a part that's on back order because something deep inside its sealed, computer-controlled, turbocharged guts decided to quit at 40,000 miles. I'll be straight with you. The cheapest trucks on the lot right now, the ones nobody photographs, nobody finances, nobody lines up to buy, are in a lot of cases the ones that'll still be running long after today's expensive trucks are flattened into cubes and sold for scrap. That's not nostalgia talking, that's metallurgy, and it's the way these things were engineered back when they were built to be understood instead of built to be replaced. I've had a lot of these apart. I've stood over a bare block with a flashlight, counting main bearings, looking at how thick they poured the iron, seeing what the engineers chose to spend money on and what they chose to skip. And once you've done that a few times, you start to see the difference between a machine that was designed to last and a machine that was designed to sell. It's not subtle. It's right there in the castings. So today I want to walk you through 7 dirt cheap pickups that almost nobody buys and explain exactly why each one will outlive trucks that cost 10 times as much. Real engines, real numbers, real reasons. By the end, you'll know what to look for, what they're worth, and which weak spots to check before you hand over the cash. There's one truck on this list where the secret's already out and the prices have crept up, and I'm going to be honest with you about that when we get to it instead of pretending. So stick around for the bottom of the list especially. Let me show you what's actually going on here because it ties all 7 of these together. For about 40 years, a truck engine was a simple promise. A big lump of cast iron, a crankshaft thick enough to use as an anvil, a camshaft driven by gears, or a chain you could practically hand down to your kids. Fuel got in through a carburetor or a basic injection system with a couple of moving parts, and that was the whole story. Nothing was sealed. Nothing was a mystery. You could fix it in a driveway with a socket set and a manual. Somewhere along the way that changed, and it didn't change because the old way stopped working. It changed because there's no money in an engine that lasts 30 years and never sees a dealership. So the industry shrank the engines, strapped turbos to them, jammed the fuel in at pressures high enough to cut your hand off, and wrap the whole thing in electronics and emissions hardware that you are not invited to touch. They called it progress. A lot of it is just a different business model. Every truck on this list is a survivor from the honest era. Keep that contrast in your head as we go because it's the thread that runs through all 7. Number 1, the Mazda B2200. And I bet money that half of you just thought, wait, Mazda made a truck? They did for years. And the fact that you forgot is exactly why this is one of the cheapest used pickups in America right now. Nobody's hunting for them, so nobody's bidding them up. You can find a running one for less than what some people spend on a phone. Here's what's underneath. From about 1987 through 1993, the North American B200 ran a 2.2-liter 4-cylinder, the F2, and it's a cast iron, dead, simple little motor that makes somewhere around 85 to 100 horsepower depending on the year. That's not a typo, and it's not going to win any races. But that's not the point. The point is the iron block, the basic fuel system, and a timing belt setup. That's what we call non-interference, which means if that belt ever snaps, the pistons and valves don't meet in a violent way and destroy the engine. The belt breaks, the engine just stops, you put a new belt on, you drive away. That one design choice has saved more of these trucks than I can count, and these things run. I've seen documented examples well past 300,000 miles. One fellow north of 360,000 on nothing but oil changes and the occasional timing belt. Owners report maintenance costs of a few $100s a year. A few hundred for the whole year. Here's what I admire about it. Mazda's engineers were told to build this thing with as few resources as they could get away with. And you'd think that would mean a flimsy corner cut truck. It didn't. They saved their pennies on the trim and the comfort, the stuff that doesn't matter, and they spent where it counts on a stout little iron motor and a simple drive line. That's the opposite of how it works now, where the cabin is plush and the engine is a grenade with the pin half pulled. One honest warning, these were built before galvanized everything, so in the salt belt states they rust. And rust is what usually kills them, not the engine. Find a clean southern or western one. Check the frame and the bed, and you've got a truck that asks almost nothing of you. Worth remembering, this one was pure Mazda, designed before the Ford partnership that later turned the B Series into a rebadged Ranger, which is part of why this early one is such a clean, honest little machine all its own. Number 2, the Nissan Hardbody, the D201 if you want the chassis code. Nissan sold these in the States from 1986 all the way to 1997, and they earned that Hardbody nickname honestly. The bed wasn't a single sheet of stamped steel like most compacts of the day. Nissan double-walled it. 2 layers. They overbuilt the frame past what a little truck of this size needed on purpose so it could take more abuse than you'd ever throw at it. The engine you want is the KA24E, a 2.4-liter Ford that showed up in 1990. Cast iron block, fuel injection, and a timing chain instead of a belt, so there's nothing back there to replace on a schedule. About 134 horsepower. Before that, from 86 to 89, you got the Z24, which had a clever twist, 2 spark plugs per cylinder for a cleaner, more complete burn, and a low compression ratio that kept the whole thing relaxed and under-stressed. An engine that never works hard is an engine that lasts, and both of these were deliberately built to loaf. These trucks routinely cross 200,000 and 300,000 miles, and there are stories out there of ones that went well past that on basic care. There was a 3.0-liter V6 option too, the VG30, if you wanted more pull, though the 4 is the one I'd chase for sheer simplicity. The 4-wheel drive versions used a transfer case Nissan was so confident in, they still sell it as a replacement part to this day. You can pick a clean one up somewhere in the $2,500 to $6,000 range. And I want to underline the thing that makes the Hardbody last, because it's a principle that applies to half this list. Nissan deliberately built these engines under stress, low compression, modest power targets, more engine than the job strictly required. An engine that's loafing along at 60% of what it could do will run for decades. An engine that's been shrunk and turbocharged to squeeze every last horsepower out of every last cc is working flat out all the time, and things that work flat out wear out. The Hardbody was built to never break a sweat. Same honest caveat as the Mazda. Rust is the enemy. The mechanicals will outlive the body. If you live somewhere they salt the roads. Find a dry one and it's bulletproof. Number 3, the Ford Ranger. The old one, I mean, not the new Global Ranger, the original little workhorse Ford built in St. Paul, Minnesota from 1983 to 2011. This is the one you see everywhere and stop noticing, which is exactly why it's cheap. There's no romance to a faded white Ranger with a ladder rack. Nobody's restoring them. Nobody's putting them on a magazine cover, and that anonymity is the bargain. The market never bid them up because the market never looked twice. But underneath that boring exterior are some of the most durable, low-stress engines Ford ever put in anything. If you want the absolute cheapest, simplest version, find one with the 2.3 or 2.5 liter Lima 4-cylinder and a 5-speed manual. It's slow. I won't lie to you. It's genuinely gutless, and you'll be planning your highway merges in advance. But it's a non-interference design like the Mazda. The later ones even ran 2 spark plugs per cylinder for a cleaner burn. It'll run past 250,000 miles without drama. And people regularly see 25, 26 miles to the gallon out of them. If you want a little more muscle, the 3.0 liter Vulcan V6 is a cast iron tank. Ford put that engine in everything for 2 decades. There are owners with well over 300,000 on those. One fellow passed for 10,000, and they take abuse and neglect that would kill a fussier motor. 2 honest things to check. The automatic transmissions in these are weaker than the manual, so a 5-speed is the smart buy. And the 3.0 has a known habit of weeping head gaskets and a part called the cam synchronizer that can wear out, though it usually warns you with a chirp before it goes. Neither one is a deal breaker. They're cheap to deal with, and the parts are on every shelf in the country. The running theme holds. This is about the lowest price of entry you'll find on a truck that simply refuses to die. Number 4, the Jeep Comanche. Now we're into the truly forgotten. Jeep made a pickup. For about 6 years, from 1986 to 1992, they took the Cherokee and stretched it into a truck and called it the Comanche, and then they quietly killed it. And most people have wiped it from memory entirely, which means when one shows up for sale, the seller often has no idea what they've got. And what they've got in the good ones is the legendary 4.0 liter Inline Six, the AMC 242. This is one of the great engines in American history. And I don't say that lightly. Cast iron block on cast iron head and 7 main bearings, which means there's a bearing supporting the crankshaft between every single cylinder. That is a level of over-engineering you normally only see in diesels. Here's a detail that tells you who built it. AMC developed that 4.0 in just 26 months on a shoestring budget by being clever with parts they already had rather than reinventing everything. And it came out tougher than engines that cost 10 times as much to develop. They even put 15 bolts on the valve cover, the most in the industry at the time, just to guarantee a leak-free seal. That's the mindset. AMC built that motor to be smooth and to be unkillable, and it is both. Up to 190 horsepower, around 225 pound-feet of torque, and a reputation for clearing 300,000 miles as a matter of routine. The thing to understand about the Comanche is that the engine is the strongest part of the truck. It's also a bit of an oddity, a unibody pickup, where the bed and the cab are part of one structure rather than a separate body bolted to a frame. Owners joke that they're on their 3rd transmission and 2nd set of axle bearings, while the 6 just keeps running. So you're not buying it for refinement, you're buying it for that motor, which will likely outlive everything bolted to it. Honest notes. It's a unibody truck, not a heavy-duty hauler, so don't expect to load it like a 1-ton. And the collectors are finally starting to notice these. So the dirt cheap window is closing faster on the Comanche than on the others. Get one while the world still forgets it exists. Number 5, the Chevrolet and GMC CK1500. The square body's smoother successor, the one enthusiasts call the Obes build from 1988 to 1998. These are everywhere. They're cheap, and the reason comes down to one engine, the small block 350, the 5.7-liter V8. That is, without exaggeration, the most produced V8 in the history of the world. It went in cars, trucks, boats, generators, industrial machines. There are more parts for this engine in more places at lower prices than for almost any motor ever made. The version you want for sheer simplicity is the early throttle body 350, what GM coated the L05. It makes about 210 horsepower and right around 300 pound-feet of torque, and the fuel system is almost comically basic. 2 injectors sitting on top of a throttle body, a handful of sensors. That's it. There are mechanics who'll tell you they've never once had to rebuild one of those throttle bodies because there's almost nothing in there to fail. GM even gave those heads what they called swirl ports, which choked the power down a little but helped it sip fuel and run clean. And a side effect of an engine that isn't straining for power is an engine that lasts. It'll run on bad gas in the cold, half maintained for 250,000 miles. And when one finally does wear out, you can walk into any parts counter in any town in America, and they'll have what you need on the shelf, because this same engine, in one form or another, ended up in boats and motorhomes and industrial generators. They're still building it for marine and industrial use to this day. That's how good the basic design is. Here's the one honest thing you have to know, and it's important on these trucks: the engine is not usually what dies. The automatic transmission, the 4L60E, is the weak link, especially if somebody towed heavy with it and let it cook. So when you shop, the engine can have huge miles and be perfectly healthy, but check the transmission carefully. And if you tow, add a cooler and change the fluid religiously. The motor will happily outlast 2 transmissions. Plan for that, and you've got a full-size truck for the price of a riding mower. Number 6, and this is the one I have a soft spot for, the Ford F150 and F250 with the 4.9-liter Inline Six. The 300, as everybody who's ever turned a wrench on one calls it. Ford built this engine from 1965 to 1996. 31 years. They barely changed it because they didn't need to. It is essentially a 6-cylinder big block, cast iron everywhere, 7 main bearings, same as the Jeep, that diesel grade bottom end. And here's the detail I love: the camshaft isn't driven by a belt or even a chain. It's driven by gears, steel gears, meshing directly together. There is nothing back there to stretch, nothing to snap, nothing to replace. It's also a non-interference design, so even in the freak event something did go wrong with the timing, the valves and pistons never collide. It doesn't make much power by modern standards, about 150 horsepower in the fuel-injected versions from 87 on, but it makes 265 pound-feet of torque, and it makes it right down low, around 2,000 on RPM, which is exactly where a work truck lives. It pulls like a tractor and it never stops. I've personally seen these pass 300,000 and 400,000 miles, and there are well-documented ones past 470,000 on the original bottom end, still pulling near factory compression. Mechanics who've spent their lives around them will tell you flat out it's one of the most reliable gas engines ever made. And I won't argue, honest stuff to expect. The exhaust manifold bolts have a habit of backing out, so you'll hear a little exhaust leak tick. The rear main seal tends to weep. There's a roll pin in the distributor that can wander. None of that will strand you. None of it is expensive. They're the kind of small annoyances you fix once and forget. The 300 will outlast the truck around it, and then somebody will pull it and drop it in a tractor or a generator, because that's the kind of thing this engine ends up doing for its second life. Number 7, and here's the one I promised to be straight with you about: the Dodge Ram with the 5.9 liter Cummins, specifically the 12 valve, built from 1989 to the middle of 1998. This is the diesel that outlives the truck, the road, and possibly the owner. It's an Inline Six that started life as an agricultural engine, a Cummins B series, which tells you everything you need to know about what it was built to endure. It weighs about 1,100 pounds. It has 6 head bolts per cylinder, so it basically refuses to blow a head gasket even when people crank the power way up. And the version everybody chases, the 90 or to 98 with the Bosch P2200 injection pump, the one they call the P pump, is entirely mechanical. Think about what that means. There's no computer in that fuel system, no sensors, no software, nothing that can throw a code and put the truck in limp mode on the side of the highway. It's a pump with plungers and a camshaft, delivering fuel the way diesels did for 50 years. No emissions hardware to clog. People run these to 500,000 miles to 800,000 miles, and there are verified examples that have crossed 1 million with nothing more than basic upkeep. And here's a tell. The very next year, in the back half of 1998, Dodge replaced this engine with a 24-valve version that swapped that bulletproof mechanical pump for an electronic one. And that electronic pump turned out to be one of the most common failure points of the generation that followed. They added complexity, and reliability went down. That's the whole story of this list in one model year change. Now, here's my honesty, because the channel doesn't work if I'm not honest with you. The secret on this one is out. It's been out for a while. These trucks have gone from dirt cheap to somewhere between $5,000 and $15,000, depending on condition, because every diesel guy in the country knows what they are. So it's the one truck on this list I can't quite call dirt cheap anymore, but I'm still putting it here, and here's why. A clean 12 valve at 12 grand is a fraction of the $66,000 the average new full-size pickup costs today, and it will outlast that new truck 2 times over with none of the emissions headaches that plague modern diesels. So measured against what's actually parked on the new lot is still the bargain of the bunch. 2 things to check, and they matter. There's a small alignment pin in the front of the block, the dowel pin, that can work loose and drop into the timing gears and wreck the front of the engine. The fix is cheap and well known, so just confirm it's been done. And the automatic transmissions behind these are the weak point, as is rust on the body and frame. Sort those, and you have an engine that will genuinely outlive you. So that's the 7. And I want to take a minute on the part that actually matters, because the list is just the surface. Look at what every one of these trucks has in common. Cast iron, timing, gears, or chains, not belts on borrowed time. 7 main bearings on the good ones. Fuel systems with a handful of moving parts. Low-stress engines that were never asked to make big power from small displacement. Machines designed so a normal person with normal tools could understand them and fix them. They were built honest. Now look at what $66,000 buys you on the new truck lot, because that's the real number. The average new full-size pickup in America right now runs about 66 grand, and the sticker prices have been topping 70,000 for months. And for that money, you get a small engine with a turbo or two strapped on, fuel injected at pressures that would frighten you, a transmission with 8 or 10 gears, and a sealed case, cylinders that shut themselves off to chase a fuel economy number and chew up their own lifters doing it, and a tangle of emissions hardware on the diesels that turns a simple breakdown into a 4-figure problem. The average repair visit on a modern vehicle now runs over $800, and it's climbing about 20% a year. One out-of-warranty repair on a turbo or transmission can cost you more than a year of payments. I'm not telling you there's a villain in a back room twirling a mustache. It's quieter and more ordinary than that. There's simply no money in an engine that runs forever and never comes back. There's a great deal of money in one that needs a specialist, a scan tool, and a dealership complexity that's cheaper to replace than to understand. Knowledge that stopped getting passed down because nobody profits from teaching you to do it yourself. Somewhere in a meeting, somebody saved a few cents a unit by sealing a system that used to be serviceable and multiplied across millions of trucks. That few cents became a fortune, and you became a customer for life instead of an owner. The old trucks weren't built by better people. They were built under a different set of incentives, and you can still buy those incentives for cheap right now on the used lot. Here's what I keep coming back to. There's a real quiet satisfaction in understanding the machine you depend on, in hearing a noise and knowing what it is, in lifting the hood and seeing an engine instead of a plastic cover and a warning label telling you to take it to an expert. When everything you own becomes a sealed box, you're not allowed to open. Something gets taken from you that's bigger than money. You lose the ability to do for yourself. You lose the knowing. These cheap old trucks hand that back to you. That's the real reason to want one, underneath all the talk of bearings and torque. So here's what I want you to actually do with all this. If you need a truck and you don't have $66,000 to set on fire, go look at the 7 we covered. The Mazda B2200 and the Nissan Hardbody and the Ford Ranger for cheap, simple, compact duty. The Jeep Comanche, if you can still find a forgotten one with that 4.06. The Chevy and GMC 1500 for a full-size truck with the most replaceable engine on earth. The Ford 300 if you want the gas engine that runs like a diesel. And the Cummins 12-valve if you want the one that genuinely never dies and you've made peace with paying a little more for it. Whatever you look at, do these 3 things every time. Check the frame and the body for rust first, because on most of these, the body dies long before the engine does. Check the transmission second, because on the Chevy and the Dodge especially, that's the real weak link, not the motor. And get it cold. Show up early and start it from stone cold, because a tired engine hides its sins once it's warm. And a clean cold start tells you most of what you need to know. Do that and picture where you'll be. 3 years from now, you're driving a paid-off truck that owes you nothing. Your buddy is making $66,000 payments and waiting on a back-ordered turbo. You hear a little tick and you know it's an exhaust manifold bolt. And you fix it Saturday morning for the cost of lunch. That's the whole game. That's what understanding your machine actually buys you. Now, I want to hear from you, because the comments on these are genuinely the best part. And I read every single one. Tell me which of these you've owned and how many miles you put on it before something finally gave up. And I really want to know the high mileage champ in your family, the truck nobody could kill, what it was and what the odometer finally read. Tell me where you are too, because what survives in Arizona and what survives in the salt of the Northeast are two very different stories. And I learned something from every one of you who tells me what you've seen with your own hands. If this was useful, subscribe and stick around, because the next one is going to make some of you angry. We're going to talk about lifetime fluids. That little word, lifetime, on your transmission fluid and your coolant and your differential, and what it actually means and whose lifetime they're really talking about, because I promise you it isn't yours. There's one fluid in particular they tell you never to change that quietly destroys more transmissions than hard driving ever has, and I'm going to show you exactly how that one works. Until then, do me a favor. Go start that old truck, let it idle a minute, and listen to it. There's nothing to be afraid of under that hood. That's kind of the whole point.